Past 8.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Talking politics with Russell Norman.
Yes, Green Politics, of course. Co-leader of the Greens it is, Russell Norman. Good morning to you, Russell.
Morning, Wammo.
Gosh, it seems like every week there's something new to moan about right now. This is really your time, Russell. This is really your time to be really unhappy about some stuff that's going on. Yesterday, the government announced its plans for Environment Canterbury. They're going to scrap the councillors, scrap the democratically elected councillors, and they're going to put in some commissioners there, and then they're going to start spraying water all over Canterbury. Is that a fair summary of what's going on?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, John Key said in his opening to Parliament that he wanted to remove the roadblocks to more irrigation in Canterbury, and he saw the democratically elected councillors as part of the roadblocks, so he's getting rid of them.
Now, the reasoning behind, of course, they say, is that the councils haven't been working efficiently, to work through proposals for water, and they're concerned about the way water is being managed there. And there's also been infighting inside Environment Canterbury. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, if we're going to apply that criteria, then we should sack Parliament, because I've noticed a bit of infighting in Parliament on occasion, where people disagree with each other. And so, of course, there's been infighting in Environment Canterbury, the regional council, because there's a huge battle between the dairy corporations and irrigators on the one side, and the people and the environment, and people who want to protect the environment on the other. And so, yeah, there's been a huge fight down there about it. And so, the government's, what happened at the last elections for regional council was some environmentalists got elected and started to say no to some of the irrigators, and so the government stepped in to remove them. They're not going to get to vote in Canterbury again until probably 2013.
It's almost like Fiji or something, isn't it? Where
well, they might get the vote earlier in Fiji, you never know.
Yeah, well, that's possible. It was interesting reading a post yesterday by Claire Browning over at pundit.co.nz. And of the Green stance on this, she says that you guys have tended to characterise Ecan as a bit of a guardian of the environment, where maybe perhaps that isn't exactly true. I mean, that's not exactly why they were set up in the first place, was it? That isn't their primary role, to be a guardian of the environment.
Well, I mean, it is in a way. I mean, they have a number of functions, but one of the functions is to protect the resources of the region. So under the RMA, regional councils are given the job of protecting water in particular. They also have a function of economic development. So they find themselves regularly balancing one against the other. For many years, Ecan didn't give a damn about the environment, and just signed off every irrigation proposal that anyone sent their way. But what happened was that people in Christchurch in particular, but Canterbury more generally, got increasingly irritated by the fact the regional council was approving all these irrigation schemes. All the rivers were drying up and getting full of crap. And the aquifer itself now is heavily polluted. So they voted in more environmentally minded councillors who started to object, and that's why the government's moved to get rid of them. So, yeah, I mean, Ecan's slowly become more aware of the environment than it was, and that's why it's being punished. I mean, the people of Canterbury voted for the wrong councillors. The National Party doesn't like people who protect the environment, so they're sacking them.
But isn't the problem, with somewhere like Christchurch and Canterbury, in fact, even New Zealand as a whole, is that it's so small that everyone has conflicting interests? Like there were people involved with Ecan that had interest in water or farming, and then there are other people that are heavily interested on the environmental side. What about getting people who look at good science, who read the scientific papers and understand exactly what happens when you drop the water table, or you spray water all over Canterbury, or you put nitrates into the soil? What about science? Where does that come in?
Well, the government's sacking the regional council on the basis of this Creech report, which was done by Wyatt Creech, who at the time was a director of a dairy company with multiple convictions for polluting the environment. Yeah. So Creech, who represented coming from the dairy industry, and then did a review of the regulator of the dairy industry. And one of the things Wyatt Creech's report criticised Ecan for was putting too much emphasis on science. He said they put too much emphasis on science. They were science-led instead of science-informed. So
Right.
in fact, what Ecan's being sacked for is putting too much emphasis on the science and not enough emphasis on the irrigators and the dairy corporations. Because the other part of the Creech report was, he said they didn't give enough emphasis to economic development. The Canterbury region has been one of the fastest growing regions economically in the country, as there's been this big expansion in irrigation. And also under the RMA, the regional councils aren't just meant to do economic development, they're meant to balance it, they're meant to do sustainable development and look at the environment as well. So, yeah, I mean, I agree, it should be based on science, but that's why they're getting the sack, is because they gave too much attention to science and not enough attention to National Party donors.
Now, I mean, you'd argue that that people who live on Canterbury, none of them are inherently, bad or wanted to destroy the environment or anything. But I just wonder, the people that do want to irrigate and continuously spray water and expand dairy farms in Canterbury, do you think that they believe that Canterbury will be better or worse off in 50 years?
Well, the thing is, they don't live in Canterbury. So, the dairy corporations, who dominate the industry down there, they're just investors who live wherever. Tauranga, Auckland, Australia, Singapore,
right.
Japan. I mean, they're international as well as national, and they live wherever. They're just corporations. Their job is to make money.
They have no quality of life interests in the future of Canterbury.
Of course not. They don't go and fish in the rivers. Their kids don't swim in the rivers, or used to be able to swim in the rivers. They're just corporations who make money. And, corporations that make money, that's fine, it's their job. But, we shouldn't pretend that they're anything other than that. And we, as a society, should make the decision about whether we think it's okay for them to make money by wrecking the environment, which is what they've done. And I'd say no. And the problem for Canterbury is that a lot of people in Canterbury were starting to say no as well, which is why they had to have their democratic rights taken away from them, because they were giving the wrong answers.
Talking about overseas corporations wanting to buy up areas of land and dairy farms, did you find it unusual that the Greens were on the same side as Federated Farmers and other such organisations last week against this proposal for a Chinese firm to buy out a huge farm in the North Island?
Yeah, I mean, they're looking at buying even more than the Crayford farms, quite a lot more than the Crayford farms. That's only one part of it. So, yeah, I mean, the Feds, to be honest, their position was a little bit unclear. So they said they wanted more information about who these people were and stuff. So they were a little unclear exactly what their position was. But, I mean, we can't have one of our most important export industries being bought up willy-nilly, so that it becomes overseas owned like much of the rest of the economy. We've got a major problem with our current account deficit because so much of the economy is foreign owned that whenever it does well, there's this huge flood of profits and dividends back to the overseas owners, which create our problem with the current account deficit.
Well, it's interesting that the Federated Farmers are unclear about who is buying or what they're about, because Bernard Hickey wrote an article in the Herald last week to say Mei Wang, who's behind this bid, has a colourful past involving failed businesses here, litigious creditors and alleged infringements of the Companies Act. UBS sued her several years ago after she launched a funds management company called UBS New Zealand. Creditors have been on her tail for various monies owed. I mean, it sounds like a continuation of the previous owners it sounds like the Crayford Farms people.
Yeah, it does sound a little bit like the Crayfords. And there's even talk that they might have the Crayfords in there as managers of these operations.
And at the end of the day, these people are managers of animals and livestock. It's outrageous.
And our natural environment. I mean, the Mohaka River is being heavily polluted at the moment. Beautiful river, heavily polluted in the Taharua catchment by some of the Crayford farms because they've dumped 9,000 cattle in there. Which the effluent is flowing down through the Taharua River into the Mohaka in the Hawke's Bay. So yeah, I mean, it's extremely worrying. I suspect it will be that the character stuff which may be their undoing if the OIO actually turns down this application, that is the Overseas Investment Office.
Although she's got a PR wing that's going to try and swing the public opinion on this one. She's got the law firm Knight Caldicott, and she's also got former TVNZ head of news Bill Ralston to help give the whole plan some shape and more public profile in New Zealand.
Yeah, and I think that should tell you something about law firms and PR companies, is they'll work for absolutely anybody because they're completely soulless.
It's like this. It's like the New Zealand guy who works for the Japanese whalers. Well, what's up with that? How does he sleep at night?
Yeah, well, exactly. It's the PR industry will do whatever, as will law firms. Whoever pays them, they'll do it. So, yeah, but we've got to make decisions as a country. Is the dairy industry a strategic asset like Auckland International Airport? We turned down the Canadians on Auckland International Airport. Seems to me we should turn down the Chinese in their attempt to take over the dairy industry. Remember, the Chinese government has made it very explicit that they expect Chinese firms to buy agricultural land all around the world in order to feed China. And Chinese firms are doing that. So, we shouldn't be naive about this. This isn't just some business transaction. This is backed by a totalitarian